February 19th, 2025, and, we've got some really interesting stories to dig into today.
Yeah.
We're going to start with one that's a little concerning when you think about transparency in government.
It is definitely a little bit concerning.
And it involves CNN, Elon Musk, and something called a Freedom of Information Act request.
Right, an FOA request.
OA, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like one of the main tools that we have to hold people in power accountable, right?
It is, yeah. Journalists, researchers, citizen can all use this tool to request information from the government.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that we try to make sure that things aren't, too shady.
Exactly. Make sure there's transparency.
Behind closed doors. Yeah, so what happened with CNN and Elon Musk?
Well, so CNN filed a FOA request looking for information about Elon Musk's security clearance.
Okay.
And this makes sense given, his roles as CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, but also as, senior advisor to the president.
Right, and all his involvement with Doji.
And all his involvement with the Department of Government Efficiency, which is Doji.
Yeah, he's got his hands in a lot of different things.
He does. He does wear a lot of hats.
So what did the government say?
So this is where things get really strange.
Okay.
CNN was informed that the entire privacy team at the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM, had been fired.
Wait, the entire team?
The entire team.
Wow.
Like not just, a few folks, the whole team, including the folks that handle FO requests and communications.
Huh.
And some of these firings aren't even effective until April 15th.
Oh, wow. So do we know if these things are actually connected?
It's really hard to say for sure right now.
Okay.
I mean, mass firings in government agencies, they do happen.
Especially with a new administration?
Right. Especially when a new administration wants to kind of reshape things.
But to fire everyone.
Yeah, it's suspicious.
It does seem a little suspicious.
And particularly given that it's the entire privacy team, including folks that, are responsible for FOO compliance.
Right.
It's a red flag for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, what are they trying to hide?
That's the question, right? Like, if they're willing to go to these lengths to not release information about Elon Musk's security clearance,
Yeah.
what else are they trying to keep under wraps?
It's a scary thought, and it makes you think about what this could mean for the future of FOA and government transparency.
Yeah. Is this a sign of things to come? Are we going to see less transparency?
Less access to information?
More centralized control of information within the federal government? It's a question we need to ask.
It's worrying, and definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on. Let's move on to our second story now. This one focuses on President Trump's pick for Labor Secretary, former Oregon Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer.
This is a fascinating nomination. It feels very strategic, I think, on the part of the GOP to appeal to working class voters, a group they've been struggling with lately.
Yeah, what makes her stand out as a pick for Labor Secretary?
Well, she has a history of supporting labor unions, which is not something you typically see from Republicans.
Yeah, not at all.
Her father was a lifelong Teamsters member, and she even co-sponsored the PRO Act when she was in Congress.
The PRO Act. Now, remind me, what is that again?
Right. So the PRO Act is basically a bill that would significantly strengthen unions, make it easier for workers to organize and collectively bargain.
So it's pretty progressive.
It's a pretty progressive piece of legislation, yeah. And the fact that she co-sponsored it is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So is this a real attempt to reach working class voters, or is it just a ploy?
That's what we need to find out. Her confirmation hearing is actually today.
Oh, wow.
So we might get some clues about, what her approach to labor policy is going to be.
So what are you going to be listening for during the hearing?
I think I'll be most interested to hear how she talks about things like the PRO Act workplace safety regulations and the National Labor Relations Board, which oversees union elections and, all the labor disputes.
So basically how she plans to balance the power between labor and management.
Exactly. It's going to be very telling what her stance is on those issues.
Yeah, so we've got potential secrecy in the government and a strategic but maybe risky nomination for Labor Secretary.
Buckle up.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride.
It's going to be an interesting week for sure.
For sure.
Talk about a wild ride. Our next story takes us into the world of taxes and the economy.
Oh, boy.
Where President Trump is making some big moves with some pretty bold proposals.
Okay, so fill me in. What's he proposing?
So he wants to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Okay, those were big, right?
Those were big. And he wants to make them even bigger.
Even bigger cuts.
Yeah, even deeper cuts. Potentially, we're talking like $5 to $11 trillion less in government revenue over the next 10 years.
5 to 11 trillion.
Trillion with a T.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So, of course, people are concerned about what this means for the national debt.
Right, because it's already pretty high.
Already historically high. These cuts could send it through the roof. Some estimates say it could reach 132 to 149% of GDP by 2035.
So what does that mean? Like, how would that impact the average person?
Well, think about it. Higher interest rates,
Oh, yeah.
making it harder for businesses to invest, for people to buy homes or cars.
Right.
Could even lead to cuts in important government services and social programs.
So not great.
Not great. You might see a slightly lower tax bill now, but you could end up paying for it in other ways down the road.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about taxes, though, right?
Right. President Trump is also shaking things up with executive orders on deregulation, government efficiency, and trade.
Oh, boy. Okay, so let's break that down, starting with deregulation. What's his philosophy there?
So he really wants to reduce what he sees as burdensome regulations.
Okay.
He's implemented something he calls a 10-to-1 deregulation initiative.
What does that even mean?
Basically, for every new regulation an agency creates, they have to get rid of 10 old ones.
Wow. So, like, anything goes?
Well, not exactly. I mean, sometimes less red tape can be good.
Right.
It can be good for business, stimulate the economy.
But so some regulations are good.
There are some regulations that are really important
Important for safety or
for protecting public health, safety, and the environment.
like what?
Think about environmental regulations, the ones that limit air and water pollution.
Yeah.
Rolling those back could lead to dirtier air, dirtier water.
Right. Which is bad for everyone.
Right. It hurts people's health. It hurts the planet. Or what about the financial regulations that were put in place after the 2008 crash?
To prevent another crash.
Exactly. Loosening those could make us more vulnerable to another financial crisis.
So it's complicated.
It's complicated. It's not about all regulations being bad or good.
Right.
It's about finding the right balance
Between economic growth and...
and protecting people and the planet.
Got it. Okay, so now let's talk about trade.
Trade.
What's happening there?
Well, he's bringing back tariffs. He's imposed tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China.
Tariffs? Why?
He says it's to protect American jobs and industries from unfair competition
Okay.
and to address things like fentanyl trafficking and intellectual property theft.
But don't tariffs hurt consumers?
They can, yeah, because businesses often pass on the increased costs to their customers.
Right, so prices go up for everyone.
Exactly. And it can also hurt American companies that depend on imported materials.
And what about those other countries?
They might retaliate.
Right.
They might impose tariffs on American goods.
Which would start
A trade war.
yeah.
And nobody wins in a trade war.
It all sounds very risky.
It's a recipe for economic uncertainty, for sure.
So we've got tax cuts that could increase the national debt deregulation, that could have unintended consequences, and tariffs that could lead to a trade war. What a mess.
It's a lot to unpack. And remember, we've also got that weird situation with the firings at the OPM.
Right, and the possible connection to Doge.
Yes, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Remind me again, what does Doge do?
So it was created by President Trump to modernize federal technology and make government operations more efficient.
Streamline things.
Streamline things, make it all run smoothly.
So is it working?
Jury's still out. It's a new agency.
But it seems to be involved with some of these personnel changes at OPM.
It does. Doge was actually tasked with overhauling the agency's cybersecurity systems and policies.
And some people think they might have pushed for firing the privacy team.
It's possible, which is concerning when you think about transparency and oversight.
Right, because if Doge is taking over functions from other agencies,
Who's watching them?
yeah, are they accountable to anyone?
It's a good question, and it brings us back to that theme of government secrecy.
It's all connected.
It is. If they're operating in the shadows without any accountability,
It could be bad.
it could undermine our democratic processes.
Okay, so big picture time. We've got tax cuts, tariffs deregulation, and this new agency Doge.
A lot going on.
What does it all mean for the average person? What are the social and political consequences of all of this?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Like, all of these things might seem like separate issues, but they're all kind of tied together in a way that could really change things for people.
Yeah, I see what you mean. We've been talking about all these economic policies, government transparency, this new agency Doge. How does it all connect back to, like, everyday life?
Well, one big concern is what all this could mean for income inequality.
Okay.
Critics are saying that these tax cuts that mostly benefit the wealthy and then cuts to social programs that help people who are struggling,
Yeah.
it's just going to make the gap between the rich and the poor even bigger.
Right, and that gap is already pretty huge.
Exactly. It's been growing for decades, and a lot of economists are worried that these policies are going to make it worse.
So what about those social programs? If the debt gets even bigger because of these tax cuts,
Yeah.
won't things like Medicare and Social Security and education funding be at risk?
They definitely could be. I mean, when the government needs to cut spending, those are often the first places they look.
Right, so people might save a little money on their taxes now, but they could end up losing out on programs they need later.
Exactly. And it's not just about the money either. That kind of economic hardship can lead to all sorts of problems.
Like
Like more poverty, more crime, more unrest. When people are struggling, they get desperate.
And then they start to lose faith in the system.
Right, and that can lead to political polarization, people turning to extreme ideologies.
Yeah, we've seen that happen in other countries.
It's a dangerous path, so these policies aren't just about economics, they're about power and social stability and the future of our democracy.
So we've got potential for more inequality, more unrest. What about the tariffs? How could those affect people's lives?
Well, tariffs often lead to higher prices.
Right.
Because when imported goods get more expensive, businesses pass those costs along to consumers.
So everything costs more.
Pretty much, you could end up paying more for clothes, electronics, food.
And American businesses could be hurt too, right?
Definitely, especially the ones that rely on imported parts or materials.
And then there's the whole trade war thing.
Right, if other countries retaliate, it could damage the global economy.
Nobody wins.
Nobody wins. And then there's deregulation.
Right, we talked about the risks to health and safety, but are there like bigger social impacts?
Absolutely, deregulation can affect all kinds of things like healthcare and education and the environment.
Give me an example.
Okay, so if you roll back environmental regulations, you could see more pollution,
Okay.
which often hits low-income communities and communities of color the hardest.
Right, because they're more likely to live near industrial areas.
Exactly. So once again, the people who are already struggling end up bearing the brunt of these policies.
And then we have this whole issue with government transparency, or the lack of it.
Right, if DOGE is operating in secret with no oversight, who knows what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a little unsettling to think that decisions could be made that affect our lives and we don't even know about it.
It's a valid concern. It feels like we're losing control, like we don't have a say in what's happening anymore.
So what can we do?
Well, we need to stay informed and engaged. We need to ask questions, demand transparency from our leaders, and hold them accountable.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know, but it's important. We're at a crossroads right now. The decisions that are made in the next few years are going to shape the future of our country.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but also exciting in a way.
It is. It's a pivotal moment, and we all have a role to play in deciding what that future looks like.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's always good to talk about these important issues.
It is, and hopefully we've given everyone some food for thought and maybe inspired them to get a little more involved.
That's the goal.
Thanks for listening, everyone.